Hey!
Hey, hi.
Welcome to the Natasha and Debbie show.
Hello.
That's brutal. Just two patriotic girls, so please don't take us the wrong way.
Howdy there. I heard something about Cavalry today, so I had to go get my cowgirl hat and put that on because that's what I do here in America. A horse, I need my hat.
Welcome to the Natasha and Debbie's Lost Her Mind show. Good to have you guys with us here today. It's the Household Cavalry, which is in the UK. The British Cavalry, babe.
Well, we're going to look at horses, so thought I'd
some of them
get my
are
outfit
on
on.
horses, not all.
I know it has nothing to do with the same thing, but it looks cute, doesn't it?
Well, you're not wrong on some things, though. America, we do still have the cavalry here, but they're no longer horse-mounted, babe.
Yeah, I guess we don't quite use horses the way we used to, do we?
Yeah. But anyway, before we get into the video that we're here to do today, guys, if you like the content we put out, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. There's no commitment. It just shows that you want us to keep making videos and you want to support our channel. That's all.
That's right. So consider that subscription there.
Stop it. Stop it.
Go use my accent.
You don't have an accent. It's a forced
I'm
one.
making one up. It's all good.
It's not bad.
Just roll with it.
It's not bad. So today's video is titled The Uniforms of the Household Cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were told that there's a little bit of information about the cavalry as well. And before we do that, though, we always like to get a little extra bit of info to know what we're doing before we dive into a subject.
Yes, we do.
So I'm going to pull up really quickly just some background information on the Household Cavalry since we don't really have a whole lot of it. So, ready to learn?
I am, and I am so thankful that you do this so we have a little bit of background.
Well, it's silly not to have some information going in, right? Because then you're watching something that you don't really fully understand. Okay, so the Household Cavalry, HCAV, is made up of the two most senior regiments of the British Army. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
That would be the Life Guards and the Blues and Royals. Royal Horse Guards and first, I can't say this word, Dragoons. Basically dragons with a second O.
Okay.
Okay, so the Royal Horse Guards and that thing I just said. These regiments are divided between the Household Cavalry Regiment stationed at Kiwi Barracks in Wiltshire and the Ceremonial Mounted Unit, the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment garrisoned at Hyde Park Barracks in London. Okay. The Household Cavalry is part of the Household Division and is the King's official bodyguard. Oh, I didn't know that.
Nice.
Although the Household Cavalry Regiment is armored, didn't know that either, but although looking at this photo, which looks like that is trooping in the color, it's not part of the Royal Armored Corps, which we'll have to look into that too.
Yes, we will.
Colonels of the regiments, the Princess Royal, Blues and Royals. I'm getting into stuff I don't know. Okay, so there's all kinds of cool stuff here, but we won't read all this. They did do a Household Cavalry Royal Tournament, the musical ride, which I know people have asked us about that before. We might check that out soon too. So that's just a tiniest morsel of what we're looking at here. But we're going to learn about the uniforms and a little bit more about them. So let's dive in and learn about the Household Cavalry.
Now, this video was originally going to be just a very basic overview of the Life Guards as a whole. We were going to talk about their uniforms, their history, as well as their modern day practices. But reading through just their uniforms alone, I realized there is a great deal of material that I didn't really want to skip over any of it. And so rather than talking about just the uniforms of the Life Guards for a very short amount of time and then largely repeating a lot of this information in the next video on the Blues and Royals, let's just combine the two in one comprehensive video on the uniforms of the Household Cavalry. Now, the most immediate way to tell these two regiments apart would be their tunics. The Life Guards wearing the bright scarlet tunics and the Blues and Royals wearing a dark blue.
Yeah, no, so really, when you look at the Blues over here, we think of the American uniforms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we jacked them from you. Those do look like U.S. Marines. I know we're going to say, no, the U.S. Marines look like the... I know that. But they're beautiful.
They are. I love the uniforms.
I do too. The scarlet red, though, oh, wow.
Yeah,
that is
sharp.
Sexy. Sorry, I just had to make that quick comment.
lifeguards wearing the bright scarlet tunics, and the Blues and Royals wearing a dark blue, very appropriate to their name. Oftentimes above these tunics, we will see the cavalry wearing bright polished cuirasses. Originally from about 1661 until 1730,
Wow.
these cuirasses were just a very dark black, and there was no ceremonial purpose
So
to
cool.
them at all. They were only really worn in the field. Between 1730 and 1820, in fact, they didn't have cuirasses at all. With the polished cuirass, which we know nowadays, being introduced in 1821, it's remained largely unchanged
Really?
since that time.
Impressive.
Moving on with armor, the lifeguards have their very beautiful white-plumed helmets with the strap being held underneath the lower lip, which, yes, that does sometimes cause complications. It's important to keep in mind that these straps aren't so much intended to actually hold the helmet on the head, but rather they're planned to deflect saber blows to the face. The Blues and Royals, on the other hand, have their red plumed helmets with the straps being held in a much more comfortable position, at least so it seems, underneath the chin. The current helmet...
What are the plumes made out of? That's my first question.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot something so important, and I can't believe I did this. Any active duty military and veterans watching, thank you for your service. Seriously, thank you for your service.
Thank you. And that's really cool that the chin strap is used to like block the face.
I don't know how effective that really is.
Maybe not, but I mean when you're
A
using,
sword to the face,
yeah, it could stop a little bit.
maybe.
That's pretty cool.
Maybe.
The straps being held in a much more
I wonder
comfortable
what it's
position,
made
at
out
least
of.
so it seems, underneath the chin. The current helmet design was introduced first in 1842 by Prince Albert to replace the old bearskin style helmets, which were used around 1830s. There have been minor changes to the plume and the spike in 1856 and 81 respectively, but otherwise the helmets are largely unchanged.
Those are huge.
Another small difference between the two regiments, the lifeguards, you might notice, have a sort of bulbous onion-shaped top to their plume rather than the Blues and Royals, which have it loosely hanging down.
Okay.
This originates to the practice of the second lifeguards before the amalgamation of the first and second. We'll talk more about that in the history video coming up. And it comes from the way that second lifeguards would wash, tie off, and then dry the plume while cleaning it.
Okay.
Some more similarities, each regiment has their thigh-high riding jack boots made of leather, the design of which dates from 1812.
Those are cool.
Each regiment on their backs also carries a cartridge box, and these are from the days of black powder firearms.
Let's just pause for a second right there and look at that. That is amazingly cool.
Uh-huh. How shiny that is, polished. Just so crisp.
It's just awesome. I don't know the
It
word
is.
for it.
It's gorgeous.
I thought you'd say yeehaw.
Each regiment on their backs also carries a cartridge box, and these are from the days of black powder firearms,
That's cool.
when the soldiers would be carrying carbines and pistols as well as their sabers. These boxes have remained more or less unchanged since 1856. Carrying those cartridge boxes, we have white cross belts, each with a red flask cord, which used to carry the powder flasks, again, back when black powder was
beautiful.
actually needed in the field. Now, the Blues had always worn these red cords, with the lifeguards adopting the flask cords in 1829. At first, the first lifeguards would wear red, and second lifeguards actually wore blue red cords, but when they were amalgamated in 1922, the regiment decided to stick with the red cords.
Which
Both
I like.
regiments also have their plain white pantaloons. These are for ceremonial wear. Before 1812, there was actually a variety of colors, with the Blues and Royals actually wearing red at one point for their pantaloons, although after 1812, these were standardized, with both regiments wearing the rather smart-looking pure
Yeah, they're
white.
beautiful.
Both regiments, of course, have their thick white gauntlets and carry very ornate cavalry sabers, the designs of which have, of course, varied over the years, and officers
want
tend to
one!
have, as usual, more
Right.
fancy-looking ones, but more or less the design has remained rather standard.
It's beautiful.
And at the very last, for the more colorful bits of this ceremonial kit, we have during the winter months, or otherwise just general adverse weather conditions, the lifeguards wear cloaks of bright red with blue collars and facings, with the Blues and Royals wearing, as you may have
Okay, makes
guessed,
sense.
dark blue tunics with red facings. Moving, I should hope, rapidly onto the uniforms of the officers, we have their the same basic color scheme for their tunics, although their collars and cuffs are much more ornate with golden designs, as well as more decorative tails.
Hold up for a minute now. Go back to that screen. Look at the ornate design of that. Like, it's just so beautiful. Every little thing is so
Yes.
well designed, and there's so much detail.
So much attention to every piece of it.
Yes, and they're absolutely stunning. But I just want to take a second too, and just not lose the beauty, and also these men and women have also, they're not just sitting there with beautiful uniforms on. They're military. They're
Right.
hardcore soldiers.
Right.
These guys have
Right.
probably fought Afghanistan and Iraq even and other places. So again, we're not stupid.
Yeah, they're
we know
not
that.
just dress up soldiers.
No, we just want to get the respect out, knowing for sure that it's not just a beautiful uniform we're sitting here admiring.
Right.
We're also admiring the person inside, that soldier inside.
Yeah.
So please don't think that we're not aware of that.
Collars and cuffs are much more ornate with golden
They're beautiful.
designs, as well as more decorative tails.
Yeah.
Their crossbelts and slings as well are a bit more pretentious, beautiful looking with the golden color. And of course their most clear marker would be the golden shoulder cords on their breastplates. Other than, say, a bit more shiny metals or a bit of a fancier sword and things like that, you know, normal officerial type things, their outfits are more or less similar to the uniforms of the troopers, with the same pantaloons and boots and all those sorts of things. But of course there are a number of uniforms outside of this, the most ceremonial, if you will, that they have. The first of which, we can begin with the undress uniform, which consists of a frock coat and overalls. They have small white gloves rather than the large gauntlets, Wellington riding boots rather than the much more uncomfortable looking jack boots, and a forage cap. The undress uniform is most commonly worn when inspecting troops under arms when they're in full dress.
That makes sense.
We also have the number 1 dress, which consists of a blue jacket with standing collar, Wellington boots, short white gloves, forage cap, as well as the cross belt with cartridge box. The officer's sword and shoulder cords may also be worn, and in the presence of a member of the royal family, the crossbelt and slings become gold rather than their regular white. We also have the number 2 dress, a service dress, which consists of a khaki brown jacket and tie, along with a white shirt, brown leather gloves, brown boots and trousers, as well as a brown, Sam Brown, belt. That meaning simply that the crossbelt and the waist belt are one and the same
No, I don't think I have.
unit, if you will.
No.
A sword in a steel scabbard may also be worn. Besides these 3 alternate uniforms, if you will, there are of course a number of uniforms based on climate conditions, like their training or in combat situations and what have you. We won't go into the detail of each and every single one of those, although you can find more information at the website linked down below.
I do have to say, though, if there was a country whose uniforms we were going to model ours after, I'm glad we chose yours.
Yes, definitely.
Because they are just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, so smartly designed too.
Yeah, just proud again that we chose that, you know?
Definitely.
So you know, can basically just kind of carry it on in a way, really.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, we have the officer's mess dress,
I've
which
seen these.
consists of a mess jacket, waistcoat, overalls, and forage cap, with only minor variances between the 2 different regiments in cut and design.
Okay, yeah.
And these are really only worn during formal evening events,
That's what I was
such as,
thinking.
say, dining at
Okay.
St. James's Palace.
I was thinking.
As for the enlisted men, the equivalent uniforms, you say number 1 dress, number 2 dress, things like that, are largely the same for the enlisted men and the non-commissioned officers. Just generally less decorations, and when it comes to things like the mess dress, not used nearly as much.
Okay.
Now, with that covering the basic discussion of the uniforms of the household cavalry as a whole, there are 2 much more distinct-looking uniforms which are still worthy of mentioning, these being of the farriers and the musicians of the regiments. But before we get into that, I would like to take a small aside and talk for a short bit about the horses themselves
Please do.
of the regiments. Now, from the earliest days of the 2 regiments, the horses were provided privately, generally by the men who would actually be riding them.
Wow.
And because of this, you might see a great variety of colors, of heights, and things like that on the field at any given time. We do know that by at least around 1692, the 2nd Life Guards were using specifically black horses, but again, the origins of that is very difficult to figure out exactly when or why that may have taken place. It's largely based around just paintings from the time period. The practice of individuals purchasing their own horses, though, would linger for quite some time, as even up until the Second World War, at least officers were required to actually purchase their own mounts. Nowadays, of course, all of the horses are directly purchased from the Royal Army Veterinary Corps, most of them coming from Ireland and being purchased around 3 or 4 years of age. They are selected by members of the Veterinary Corps and by the riding master, who is responsible for overseeing their training. The general requirements for the horses to be purchased are that they must be at least 16 hands tall, or about 5 foot 4 inches or thereabouts, and unbroken. The horses chosen for musicians do prove a few exceptions to this rule, but we'll cover that later. It takes about 8 to 10 months to train each horse, and about 16 weeks or so to train the rider. First, they do it in a full khaki uniform, and then in the proper ceremonial kit. Here we have a short video that I found at the Household Cavalry Museum over at Horse Guards in London about the training of the men.
I love horses, but I'm afraid of falling off of them. I've been on horses, but...
Yeah, falling off ain't no fun.
No. You should know, cowgirl.
I luckily have not fallen off a horse. And those horses are absolutely beautiful. And I never thought about where they get their horses
I know,
from.
in
And that
Ireland, I
is
didn't know
so
that.
cool.
Yeah.
The horses. So I will leave you
Poor guy.
to that and talk with you again in the next, 2 minutes or so.
Gonna have to read, the audio is not present.
We start off just on the saddle with legs hanging freely. It's to build up the muscles in the back, the legs, and what have you. And then as you get into about week 3,
Oh, wow.
get your stirrups, which you get to put your feet into, you relax your bottoms a little bit.
The worst bit is probably going to be adapting to
Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, exactly.
painful thing. You kind of you end up waking up the next day and not quite being able to sit down or walk or anything. Because we do drill ride first, there I had 2 weeks of listening to horror stories about people that had their fuses chewed up.
Oh, come on, is that true?
So I was a little bit nervous about approaching some of these horses.
I've gone 6 times. 5 of those was when I broke my ribs.
Ooh.
Ouch.
I broke my ribs, got back on, couldn't stay on, jumped off, got back on, couldn't stay on, jumped off. So I tried to complete the lesson, which I did. I couldn't go much further.
I was nervous starting with horses because you don't know again what they could be like. The first horse that I had was absolutely ginormous, so I was quite shocked. Got well bit, so it's my 10th week, and I was all off.
It'll happen.
Working as a team. It's a team environment. At night, we're all upstairs, cleaning kit, listening to music. So you get to know each individual.
Good good stuff for when you go to Knightsbridge, and you're up there at the trips as well, because you know the faces where they've been here. And the same you're back across to Windsor to the base of the armoured regiment, you'll kind of know faces. So everybody knows a good group of friends in the regiment.
Now, earlier on,
So that makes it sound like they kind of like do a rotation of things.
Well,
So
You gotta learn the horses.
yeah,
first.
I'm sure. But I wonder, like 10, 12 weeks training with the horses. And then that's going to be hard kind of going back and forth. But that is so cool that they get to work with them one-on-one.
I mentioned the farriers,
Whoa.
and while we can talk more specifically about their actual role, about what they actually do in the future, suffice to say for now, they're a sort of combination blacksmith and vet, as they're responsible for shoeing the horses of the army. Now, each farrier, regardless of if they're a member of the Lifeguards or the Blues and Royals, wear the same dark blue tunics, though the farrier of the Lifeguards is always distinguishable because the plume on his helmet is actually black
isn't it?
rather than white, with the Blues and Royals farriers
Okay.
getting the standard red. Farriers are always found bringing up the rear in any significant parade of the troops, and they are most infamous for carrying these large axes rather than the traditional sabers. Historically, I should say, these axes would have been used to dispatch wounded horses as well as to collect their hooves, which, again, we can talk more about why they would do that in future videos.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Again, suffice to say for now, the hooves would carry information used to identify which horses had fallen in battle and such. In
Blacksmiths
line
too.
with their role as the shoers of each regiment, their tunics also have very distinctive horseshoe insignias. And lastly, this brings
what?
us to the musicians, who, when compared to the troopers of either regiment, look dramatically different. This is, of course, mainly due to their brightly colored state coats. Now,
I've never
these
seen that.
coats date back at the very latest to 1661 and have remained remarkably unchanged to this very day. Now, as you may be aware, going back to the 17th century, the relationship between Charles II and the Parliament was rather tedious at best,
yeah, it was.
and while Parliament controlled the treasury, they refused to fund for the livery of the cavalry's musicians. So Charles II was actually forced to pay for the uniforms out of his own private funds,
Good.
and the musicians were clad in the livery of the king. The state coats, as such, are a bright golden and red colored, each one being decorated with the cipher of the current reigning monarch.
Which sadly has now changed.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if it has yet, I would assume, but I don't recall seeing these in anything we've done. Have you?
I don't either, but I mean, they're pretty cool. So I think we would
Pretty
have.
cool.
I think we would have recognized them.
Yeah, I don't think I would have missed that. But then again, I'll feel stupid if somebody says, "Oh yeah, you saw them on this video."
Yeah.
I don't recall seeing these before. Those are amazing.
Yeah.
I think I have nothing else to say. There's no other adjective.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Currently, of course, being ER2 for Elizabeth Regina II, Queen Elizabeth II in Latin. And here you can see an old Victorian coat with a VR. I'm sure you can guess who that one's for. Other than this changing of the cipher between each generation, though, the coat has remained, again, remarkably unchanged over the past 350 years. The only real changes being to the standing collar and the shoulder wings. In addition to their very shiny state coats, the musicians wear jockey caps, which date much later to about the late 18th century. Okay. Their original shape was with a much larger and more rounded peak, with the modern design being introduced in 1881. Now, these lovely uniforms aside, if chance should have it that no member of...
I have seen those.
Yeah, you remember?
I've seen them standing like that.
Yeah.
Do you remember too? Or is it just me?
Vaguely.
Yeah, but it was like a quick passing of something.
Yeah, but I don't like they showed before on the horses. I don't remember seeing that.
No, definitely not on horses, but I've seen this.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
If royalty or the mayor of London happens to be present for the occasion, the musicians often will revert to their non-state dress, recognizable as the standard uniforms from their original.
That's what we know.
While there's not all that much to say about the instruments themselves, or at least not much that I could say about the topic, the two great big kettle drums are always a favorite. The horse which carries them must be particularly strong and well-trained. Each one actually takes around a year and a half to fully train for the job.
Gosh,
and each drum horse is actually a hearty Clydesdale cross. I don't actually know if they're hearty, but I don't know, they look rather hearty, I assume them to be. In any case, these horses often carry very heroic names, things such as Achilles and Hector, Alexander the Great, or Jimmy. And the drums themselves are also rather ornate and usually clad in rather royal coverings. Each of those drums is actually a total of 68 pounds, and when you combine the two of those with the weight of the rider and saddle as well,
that's a lot.
It seems rather obvious why just any old horse wouldn't do, add in the fact, of course, that they have to put up with a lot more noise than the regular horses.
That's a lot.
And no, they do not get cotton stuffed in their ears.
Oh, come on, dude.
Well, maybe they should.
Go back to that.
Than the regular horses.
That is absolutely beautiful. Everything about that. Those horses are so gorgeous.
Yes, they are.
And everything on them, everything about this picture.
Yeah, and if you notice, of course, the uniforms that the men wear are absolutely perfect. But then you think the horses have to be groomed and cleaned, and they have to look pristine, too. It's beautiful.
All of it. Absolutely.
And no, they do not get cotton stuffed in their ears. Also of note might be the trumpeters of the regiment. Their instruments as well bear the royal coat of arms, and their horses, in very stark contrast to the rest of the household cavalry, are always a very pale gray. Trumpeters, of course, were the traditional means of communication between various cavalry regiments and their commands in the field, a role which they filled really up until the last days of cavalry actually being used on the battlefield. The trumpets themselves are valveless, and because of this, they're limited in the number of notes that they can actually play.
Really?
They're usually used in fanfares for the monarchy. We always see them right before the singing of the national anthem, as well as during long guards over at Horse Guards Parade. Of course, the practice of using trumpeters to hearken the arrival of nobility or royalty date far earlier than just the reign of Charles II. Well, my goodness, I certainly did manage to drone on about uniforms for a lot longer than I certainly thought I would be able to. In any case, our next video will be about the history of the Life Guards, the 1st Regiment in the Household Cavalry. If you have any specific questions about the history of the Life Guards, or about their uniforms, about how they operate nowadays, and anything like that, be sure to ask, and I'll see if I can include it.
I could stand here or sit here and keep watching this, but he's done.
Yes.
Wow. And I'm stuck again.
Amazing. Help you
I'm
here.
good. That was a lot of really cool things to learn about. And I'm glad I read just a tiny bit of history beforehand to give us just a literally 2 sentences.
Right.
We'll try to find more information about the cavalry and roles and things, and see if I can't find a video from the same person on the history. But I'm just in love with all of the uniforms, of the history about them, how they changed, and how a lot of them really didn't change that much is actually quite surprising in some ways, and in other ways, not really, because we know that you guys keep your traditions and things for a very, very long time, which I think is awesome. I love that about it.
I do too. And when something works, why change it?
Yeah, when
You know?
it's especially that beautiful, like
Change it with the changing monarchies as
Of
they
course.
change, but I mean, basically, they're still the same as they have been, which is like you said, with holding with tradition,
Mhm.
which is totally awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you guys keep with that, and they are beautiful.
They are.
Just beautiful.
The scarlet tunics, like I said, they're my favorite, but those gold ones, though, for the musicians,
Mm-hmm.
they look different on a horse versus just standing there, of course.
Yeah.
But they're just, it's lovely. They're all
Yeah.
beautiful. If you guys like this video, hit the like button for us and consider subscribing to the channel. Again, we want to thank all active duty servicemen and women and veterans. Thank you all for your
Thank you.
service. And we sincerely do mean that and hope that you accept that. And again, just want to say back, reiterate what I said earlier. We are appreciating these uniforms, the history of them and things like that, but we know there is a soldier behind that
Yes.
that has probably, most likely, been deployed and has fought to, secure all of our security.
Mhm.
And we thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we're not, that's again, not over our heads or
Definitely not. We know that they have trained, they have worked hard, they've been through
they're warriors.
the full training, and they are full on soldiers.
Yeah, they're warriors. And I wonder how many of these men may end up to be, and women. I didn't see any women in this video, but will end up to be Chelsea Pinceners someday.
You never know.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate you being here with us. And we'll be back into some more military stuff here soon. But until next time, as always, love, life, jazz.
Be as strong as Tyson.
Bye, guys.
Bye.